I have a topic we could obviously talk about. It's just an obvious one. Monty, do you want to know what's mad? This is why I hate that you didn't ever have the open circuit after season 2 in League of Legends, because it means the narratives get too crystallized when they're not legit. Like, if someone wins a split, you have to wait like a month and a half before they play another playoff, or they go to a national tournament, maybe it's a month away, etc. So what you never know is like what's form that was just for that week and what's form that's like for that 3 months. Like, it can sort of mask that and seem that way. Bro, it is literally only 3.5 weeks since T1 won the Esports World Cup. T1 now can't beat anyone. Anyone. Like, Hanwha Life actually is dunking on these motherfuckers. It's actually embarrassing, bro. Like they're in really bad shape right now, mate. It's crazy, isn't it? It's fucking crazy the shape they're in, mate. Because if you think about it, right? If like, look, they'll probably almost certainly still snatch a playoff spot, etc. But like, mate, I know people have called the end of T1 many, many, many times, but if they turn it around now, like,
it's a bad.
I'll be very impressed, mate. I'll be very impressed.
I do want to talk about T1 because obviously, you know, them losing both their matches is really important, especially because they lost to BNK.
Recently they lost to HLE as well. They lost what, 2 times in like a week and a half or something mental.
Yes.
It's insane.
Yeah, and the first time they probably should have won. The second time they got completely like 360 dunked on by Hanwha Life. So, I mean, it was not close series. They were just egregiously inting a lot of the time. Not saying it was the Esports World Cup with T1, but there are many such countries out there. Maybe get this. Even if you're just in the airport, probably a good idea. So thank you to ExpressVPN. T1. Also, shout out to ExpressVPN, who has the T1 colors, the red and white. Very pleasing for us moving into this next segment. They came off this loss, as you mentioned, Thorin, to Hanwha Life last week. It was not super convincing. A super convincing loss in that they had winning states in all 3 games and could have absolutely won this series, but ended up kind of throwing it. They did drop a game to Breon when they came back, but it was Wednesday. They had just gotten back from Esports World Cup. It was in, you know, I kind of forgave that one. But then we get to this.
It's the Fear X one that got to you, isn't it?
It's the Fear X. Well, I mean, they also got.
They aren't a good team, mate. They are not a good team.
I mean,
I don't care what anyone says.
I will say, Fear X did beat both KT and T1 this week, so we can't shit on them too hard.
Sure,
we can't shit on them too hard. They actually are on a pretty legit winning streak.
Just go look at the roster, though, guys. These are like a bunch of never were's, never mind, like what haven't been yet. Like, none of these players are going to be anything.
I mean, I think Closer is a bum, and I also think that Clear, I don't understand what's going on with Clear because he was dog shit for most of this year and is now just having like the best week of his life. Like, he actually looks really good. So I don't know what's going on at Fear X, but what I do know is that we just watched them beat T1, and T1. The joke I made on the Monty and Wolf show about their match versus Fear X was that, so we see T1 come in and they're like, hey guys, oh shit, how did Top Esports beat Gen G? We can never beat Gen G. How did they do it? Oh, they played Tristana, Ivor, and Ezreal. Let's just do that so we can learn how to beat Gen G. Then they try and use these champions and they are just terrible. They're terrible with these. Like, Guma's a bad Ezreal. Faker is the worst Tristana in LCK, just abhorrent. And
that thing I said on the past episode about him having a champion Ocean has aged so badly. That's such a bad take.
He played 3 Trist games in this series and lost 2 of them. I mean, this is coming off.
Which, remember, if Caps just even locks in a Trist, every European fan saying it's a broken champion, then your GOAT plays it and it looks trash, mate.
Not only that, but he like straight up through the game against Hanwha in the 3rd game on Trist. So this really has not been the pick for him. And Owner might be a perfectly serviceable Ivern player. I mean, they did smash game 2 of this series, like mega smashed Fear X. Like, the most dominant game was T1 beating Fear X in game number 2. I mean, game 1 was pretty dominant or game 3 was really dominant from Fear X. I mean, there were a lot of one-sided games in the series. To be fair, all the games were one-sided, but T1 did absolutely destroy them with the Trist and with the Ivern. But it doesn't really speak to T1's strengths, this meta. First off, the 80 carry champion pool is so bad for Gumayushi.
That's all right, and it's going to expose Faker too, mate. You'll see.
He is a shit Kai'Sa player. He's a shit Kai'Sa player. He is not a good Zeri player, and he's not a good Ezreal player. And Faker's been trying to play this Tristana and really hasn't had a lot of success. Zeus has been scrambling around to find some picks to play at the top side, but
bad in some of these games, mate.
Zeus has not looked good. He looks really off his form right now, and Keria, I think Keria had a very good esports World Cup, but hasn't looked super strong domestically this split. And it's been really, I think, very disappointing to watch T1. I do think a lot of this is the meta, and maybe it's burnout as well from traveling to these events, because T1's just been going, right?
Oh.
I think one of the issues with T1 is, like, ever since this roster was assembled, Thorin, they haven't had a break. Like, if you actually just think about it, it's wild, the schedule they've had. Plus, Faker's been injured, right?
There was those few weeks they took off last year in the summer, but aside from that, yeah, true. They technically did turn up, but
the injury break. But I mean, if you literally
basically, it's the same concept, Monty, as to why, like, basically in sports where you play a lot of games, like the famous examples of ice hockey and basketball, if you have like a dynasty, the reason it ends up getting cut short isn't even that you're not that good anymore. It's just that in like 4 seasons you have played like an extra half.
I mean, just
of like playoff games. Exactly. Yeah, you're just going too deep.
I'm just like, if you guys actually think about it. So this roster started in 2022. What happened in 2022? Go to MSI. Literally play through the finals. Yeah, every final. They play into the finals at Worlds. So they play the longest you could play at MSI, the longest you could play at Worlds. Yep. Okay. Then we come back 2023. Once again, like, okay, so they don't make it to the finals of MSI, but they have a deep run at MSI. Then they
were both domestic finals. So again,
they were both domestic finals. Yeah. They then go to the World Finals. They go all the way to the World Finals and win. Then, as you mentioned earlier, they go to France and play this off-season tournament. And this is like in the middle of Faker's injury and everything like that. And then we get to this year. Okay, so this year, they're in the finals again of spring, right? And it's a grueling finals. It's a 5-game banger. And then we go to MSI, right? Obviously not a great MSI for T1, but they're still there. Then they go to Esports World Cup. They play the maximum number of matches at Esports World Cup as well. Then they come back to Korea and I would assume are still the favorites to be in the finals of this one as well, despite their current losses. So, I mean, it has been absolutely brutal because it's not like they have fresh players that they substituted in. It's literally just these same 5 guys, except for when Faker was so injured he couldn't play the game last summer. And they have played basically the maximum amount of tournaments. They played optional tournaments. They played the optional Esports World Cup. They played the optional, like, Red Bull Proving Grounds thing. I mean, some of these may not be optional because Red Bull's a sponsor of theirs. And also, I know the teams don't want to present this, but the Saudi government is a sponsor of theirs. That's what being a partnered team with Esports World Cup means, guys. They have a Saudi sponsorship. And so they do kind of have to go to these events. But it's hard. And I think it would not surprise me if this group of players was burnt out. And especially because, Thorin, they are the reigning world champions. Like, they accomplished this goal with this roster. If we're being honest, this roster probably should have been blown up at the end of Worlds. And you might say, well, why would you do that? And the answer is because this shit happens, guys. You need to inject. This is just how esports works. If you are an esports GM, it's not like a lot of sports rosters where you don't blow it up. Like, oftentimes you have to blow it up because you have to, like, inject freshness into these rosters. Otherwise they get stale real fast.
I also think if you just look at it, Monty, the reason why you should have blown this roster up is it's the old saying, quit while you're ahead. You fucking won Worlds, bro. Like, in a year when JDG and Gen G looked mega strong, you won Worlds anyway with this scuffed lineup. Just quit while you're... That was the best case scenario. Like, the problem always this lineup had, Monty, was they weren't the best even in Korea unless it was their meta or they created their own meta. What that infers already is you're sort of like band-aiding your own fucking team, even though you've played together now 1 million years. Like, this lineup's been together an extremely long time. I mean, if you take off Zeus and you just make the core, they were together the year before that as well. Like, this lineup has played together so long. Like, all these things that people are going to complain about that manifested in these series, Monty, were there the whole time. They just didn't always all come to bear at once. Like, oh, could Keria have metas where he's just a normal support and sometimes absolutely. He could also have the ones where he leads the whole world and no one can play what he plays. Can Zeus be a really strong top laner who looks like the best in the world? Yes. Can he also get dunked on by Thorin every fucking time they play, seemingly, and bizarrely just get shit all over and get no kills? Yes, that does happen. Can Faker be really good when he has a couple of champions that are right within the sweet spot of the meta and he can play like his Zhao Hu floor general style? Yeah, but when it comes to these ones where you have all these broken champions that you actually have to really carry out of, he doesn't do it. Like, and then by the way, the guy I feel the worst for, because Gumayushi, I'm sorry, Gumayushi, you can't play like 3 of the strongest ADCs. Maybe you're not supposed to be in the same conversation as Ruler and Viper, mate, because they just have to play whatever's OP, mate, and they play all those champions. And the guy I feel sorry for, though, is Order, the guy who I think should have been the MVP of EWC, because, bro, he is not being given a chance by T1. Not only is he in games now, Monty, where there's no winning lanes. Imagine this Hanwha series, these 2 Nidalee picks. Good fucking game playing from behind on those picks, my dude. Like, that looks like a nightmare draft to play into if you're Order, mate. What are you doing?
And in the Hanwha game, like, that was a good example of Renekton played well by Thorin, because you see, the thing is like, if you can get control over the Gnar lane and push him in, the dive potential is there. Nidalee is great at many things. Nidalee is really bad at countering dives, like really bad. And so when you have a Gnar that's getting abused in the top lane, the Nidalee can't do anything to stop the dives.
No agency at all in this game, did he? What can he do?
Like, you can't stop a dive as Nidalee. Like, that's not a thing that happens. So Zeus was just like pummeled into the dirt in that game. And that was a game, like, I'm not saying every Renekton game is bad, guys. I'm saying that blinding Renekton into players that obviously play Renekton counters and then can construct complete anti-Renekton teams. And it's not like it's hard to create an anti-Renekton team in this meta. Anti-Renekton teams naturally occur whether Renekton is picked or not. That's the problem, right? The meta is Renekton is biased against Renekton, so you have to be deliberate about Renekton. And sure, there are some really good Renekton combos. Renekton Nidalee, Renekton Zyra. Setting up for these long engages can be very useful, right? Renekton Sejuani. But you have to have a plan about how you're either going to beat the top laner or the top side of the map into a pulp in order to win, or, right, then Renekton is useless, right? So I think
also, by the way, so obviously what's great about this Hanwha Life too is this, Monty. All the people who get all the hate on the forums were exactly the ones dunking on T1. So you know that boy, it's that boy, fucking Zika, didn't even die this series. You know, Peanut, by the way, Peanut's actually fucking smurfing this split. Like, he was mega. He just dominated in this one. And then even Thorin, who everyone loves to dunk on and say shit, tell you what, Zeus must owe him fucking money. Did he pull Zeus out of burning car, give him his kidney or something? What the fuck is this? Every time he plays him, Zeus just becomes like a fucking Padawan. What is this shit? By the way, I think actually the one like I want to, your boy Peanut was actually fucking, he was mega in this series, mate.
He was mega in the Poppy as Poppy. He was mega as Poppy in the first series too.
Domestically in Korea, he is the master, mate. He just schools people. He just fucking schools them.
Well, also, this is the Vi Talia game that you want to have, right? Like, Vi's banned, and like you have the synergy between those champions. That's why I'm confused when I see Vi Talia in Europe and it does fucking nothing, and then I watch Hanwha Life just completely destroy T1 with Vi Talia. This is a good meta for Zika, though. Like, this is a great meta for Zika. He's gotten better at champions like Azir and Talia, and then he's always been good at AD mids outside of Corki. But the thing about Corki is, hilariously, he's now even good at Corki, because Corki, all the things that Corki did that Zika sucked at, like playing around package, he can now just be a lane bully, and he's great. And I mean, you even said Viper. Viper has been the best player in the league.
That just goes without saying. At this point, that goes without saying. Once again, water's wet, the forest green, and Viper's the best. We all know that.
Yeah,
it's also his best meta for the champions. If you think about it, like everything he can just fucking go ham on. Of course.
But I mean, his Kai'Sa, his Zeri, his Ezreal, all the champions that Gumayushi and T1 are very sus at, this guy is fucking insane on.
The eye test just checks out like a motherfucker for that
it's
player.
Crazy.
It's so good, isn't it? It's so good.
Yeah, so if you're not watching Hanwha right now, Hanwha, I mean, it's a good meta for them. It really is a very good meta. And the thing about Peanut is that Peanut is a pathing guy, and Owner has never been the, like, 4D chess pathing guy. Owner's the guy who comes into mid lane or bot lane, and he helps you dive them and gets you more ahead, and then he sets up a tent in your jungle and just sits there on engaged champions and invades you, right? Peanut's the guy who's like, well, how do you know how about I flash over this wall, but I still have Hex Flash on Peanut, and then I'm like surprised in your lane. Like, and on champions like Zyra or these picks that you can really get a lot of value on a smart objective control and pathing, like it's great. It's great. But you know what's so weird about T1 in all of this is that it's like they forgot how to play the game the way they like to play it. And what I mean, Thorin, is like against BNK Fearx. Okay. So Fearx, Raptors on Zyra. We're 20 minutes into the game. That means Baron's up. This is game 1. Faker on Tristana TPs to bot lane, and then Fearx just takes Baron at 20 minutes because Zyra can do Baron by putting a bunch of plants down and ulting Baron in no time flat. And it's like, T1, you are the Baron sneak team. You know what this timing is. Why is Faker TPing as Trist to bot lane to save tier 1 bot turret and trading it for Baron? It's terrible. So like the thing about T1 is like they don't seem to even be able to make the shot calls that they have made in the past before. And that's what's disturbing about them. Like we know like, okay, if you want to hand wave this and say, they can't play these champions. Fine. You're right. They can't. It's a bad meta for them. But why are they making mental and macro mistakes? That's not who they're. That's weird.
Yes. Right, 2 things for you. 1, this is a purely random tangent, but you might appreciate it. The reason I also can't handle the name Fearx is there's actually a film from 2003 starring John Turturro and was directed by the guy who did Drive called Fearx, which is like a really sort of like psychological film. It's about like a writer who's like got some shit. Anyway, you'd have to look it up. Like it's one of those ones where all like it's like a super psychological, it's like experimental type film. It's quite a weird one. So 1, I always just think of that, and it's obviously a shit League of Legends team. But 2, Monty, this is where I feel like we're in WWE. Like the narratives they're not, you know what, Monty? These aren't real wrestling matches that are happening and people with superior wrestling ability are winning. These are storylines being set up, and I can see the cynical next story plot point. Because right now, T1's at its absolute crisis point. They're 5-5. The next match, guys, you can't even script this, is against KT, who in theory suck, remember. If KT wins... They will be 2-0 in this whole split against T1, and they'll overtake them in the league standings. Yep. If you hate T1, if you're Dom, basically, that day could be your Independence Day. I want it to be like the movie Independence Day, where he does that speech at the end, Bill Pullman, about how it's Independence Day. That could be for Dom, your moment to rise up and take these bastards down for good. And also, by the way, if T1 loses that game, Monty, bro, how many trucks are they going to send? Is it going to be like it's going to be like that Canadian truck convoy or something like, holy shit, dude, what are they going to do? Because the reason it's perfect is because it's KT, Monty. The sheer iniquity of losing to this Beryl Pioshik, bum-ass KT lineup twice in one set. Like at this point, they may as well just pretend Faker's injured again and bring Popey in just to try and recreate Cargo Cult style, the same scenario. Because I think if they lose this next series, just psychologically, they're surely in so much trouble, mate. Sorry.
I mean, hilariously, KT also lost to Fearx in that same week, right? So they're coming off the same shame in a way.
Well, obviously, in that case, you have to lose to them to make it look legit. Well, you have to like create the.
I'm glad you bring up the standings though, because Fearx won both of those matches, they now are 5-6, right? Because they won versus Nongshim. So basically, one of those teams is going to be tied with Fearx.
You mean if Fearx beats Bro, Fearx could actually leapfrog T1? Yes. Bro, this actually is the haters' ball. If you hate T1, this is your glory day. I know it's too good, isn't it? It's too good.
Probably until T1 plays DRX, and then obviously like T1 will probably win that one, but who knows at this point in time. And then the week after that, Thorin, we actually have the T1 Genji rematch. So it's and T1 actually next week, T1 plays D+ and Genji in the same week. And like, do you favor them over either of those teams right now? D+ has looked a lot better, and D+ is actually kind of playing their own style in a very interesting way at the current point in time. D1 versus or D plus versus Hanwha later this week is probably going to be a banger.
What's funny is I saw someone in Twitch chat tried to say this, so I'm just going to say it right now. Have you ever noticed, Monty, how convenient it is? It's only the moments when T1 loses that suddenly DDoSing's the biggest issue ever. Injuries are give me a fucking break. Bro, he had that. If this injury was from last year and it still affects him, then he was injured during that fucking run in the playoffs in LCK where he looked good. He was injured at Esports World Cup where he just won it, and he was injured at MSI. So he's injured at all of it. The point is, you're only bringing it up now because he's fucking losing, isn't he? So, yeah, spoiler. Exactly.
He also did look very good in spring. And he was fine at Worlds too. So I don't know. Who knows what the nature of the true nature of the injury it was, but he was on point in spring. He was one of their best players in spring. It's the meta that's really hurting him. He just doesn't have the flexibility in the meta, and this team was not designed, I think, to be successful in this meta. Their success has never come in the way that the game is being played now. So hopefully, this week, last week was 14-13.
I'm sorry. I'm just going to do this. How can you actually complain? Two factors here, Monty. One, this player has played longer at the top level than maybe any other esports player ever. It's totally logical he'd get injured eventually. Two, he is Korean, where you grind like a motherfucker. And those memes of like the Tiger Mom of like, A is acceptable. B is, basically all right. C is kicked out of the house. You know that joke of like where they do that? That almost is what they do. So first of all, he's been grinding like a motherfucker as well as a one-man army. He's essentially done what we just said T1 does. He's been in a million worlds and gone deep. He's been in a million LCK and gone to the final. He's essentially put the most wear and tear on his body of any league player ever. And then finally, I'll just throw this out there. Like, hasn't he had a pretty amazing career? Like, it's actually logical eventually his wrist would give out. Like, it can't just last forever. Like, to me, I think this is one area where people in esports are going to have to learn eventually. You can't just grind forever. It's the same concept as the pitcher in baseball, Monty. That movement is so unnatural to do this with your arm. And also, this is really unnatural to constantly just move your fine motor precision muscle like that. Like, that's why everyone who does that as a job has the same wrist injuries. Surgeon, guitar player, drummer, like archer, all these sports, all of them get the same injury that eventually ruins your career. So, like, even though I understand, you might think, like, well, it sucks for Faker. He would be better if he wasn't injured. Bro, one, I think he got a lot out of the tank, didn't he? And then two, he did have, like, it's totally logical eventually it would break down. Like, it's not unfair. If anything, by the way, what's unfair is the million other players who had their wrist issues in 2014 or 2010. He held out a long time before he ever got these big issues. So I understand it's not ideal now, but it's also like, it's like a logical consequence. Like I say, the sheer wear and tear on this guy's wrist must be bonkers. Like imagine if you could total how many games Faker had played a league. It'd be so outrageous number, wouldn't it?
He also exists at a time period in esports where he's going to get very good care for this as well.
Yeah, that helps too. Absolutely.
Like, clearly they're going to spare no expense in terms of taking care of him because he's, there's a lot of money.
And here's a funny one. As a historian, that you'll like this. Do you want to know another player, Monty, who towards the end of their career, when they were still really good, kept getting constantly inhibited by wrist injuries? Flash. Same story. Yep. They've just played 1 billion games and they've been in a billion finals, had a really long career. Like, unfortunately, this is what's going to happen in esports. That's why I give the example of the baseball pitcher, because someone once described it to me like this. They said in baseball, you don't usually just choose to retire. When you're the pitcher, your arm just fucking wears out eventually. You're like, oh, well, nothing I can do now because you've just done that 1 billion times, haven't you? Like, it's good. It's inevitable. It's going to happen at that point, isn't it?
Yeah, there's tons of obviously very weird injuries that baseball pitchers have because of the way they're doing it, which is why, typically you don't want a Shohei Ohtani who's like trying to be one of the best hitters while also being a pitcher, because it's like, shit, he's kind of like ruining himself twice as fast. Yep. Exactly. It's cool while it's happening, but it's not very cool in the long term most of the time. And even Ohtani has had several seasons now where he just couldn't pitch, right? He just couldn't pitch. Like, he had some injury, so he could still hit, but he couldn't pitch, right? So it's been up and down for sure. But yeah, look, if Faker's wrist is still hurting him, I mean, I do think the solo queue thing, we haven't heard about that in a little bit, so maybe that's been fixed. I have no idea whether that's a persistent problem or not with them. They've kind of hushed up about it, so maybe they're trying to just not give publicity to it so it goes away. Maybe they're still having those practice issues. I have no idea.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.